everyone, it's Stacey. Thanks so much for joining me on my channel. Today we're doing our mystery block of the month and we're up to block 7 and we're going to be doing the Grecian block. Now I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. It could also be referred to as the churn dash block, and that's with the fabrics placed in a different order, but when they're like this it's called the Grecian block. It's actually super quick and easy to make, so let's get going. So to make our block, you're going to need to cut the following pieces, and you can find this legend over on my website. I'll put a link in the description below. For the half square triangles in the 4 corners, we're going to make them all in one go, and for the A fabric, you need to cut one piece at 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches squared. The B piece, one piece again at 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches squared. Then these 2 pieces in the middle here, we're going to do them all in one go as well. So you'll need to cut for the C fabric, one piece at 2.5 inches by 18 inches, and then the D fabric, one piece at 2.5 inches by 18 inches, and then the center piece, which is E, one piece at 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. So to start off, let's do our half square triangles. So I've got my A and my B piece here. Now what I'm going to do is face them right sides together. I'm then going to make sure that all my edges are lined up really nicely on all 4 sides. And when I'm happy that they are, I'm just going to pop some pins in place, so it stays that way with all those edges lined up. And now what I'm going to do is sew around all 4 edges. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, I've tested my stitches, I've got my Orifil thread on, which I like to use when I'm quilting, and I'm stitching at stitch length 2. I'm not going to worry about a back stitch, but I am starting right on the edge of my fabric here. And then I'm going to stitch right off the edge, lift my foot up, and just turn that around, and there's a little bit of extra thread here. I'm just going to tuck that under, and then I'm going to start on the very edge again. I prefer to do this than to actually turn on the fabric, because if we turn we're just guessing. This way I know we're not accidentally cutting any corners at all. So I'll carry on sewing now right to the end and do the same on all 4 corners. Okay, and now trimming the thread. Removing those pins, and I'm just going to give it a quick press. So I'm just going to press it so it's sitting really nicely for when we're going to cut it into our 4 pieces. And it also means that we've set the stitches at this stage rather than when we've trimmed them. So it serves 2 purposes. Now let's cut. So now all we're going to do is cut from corner to corner on the diagonal on both sides. So I'll just take my ruler, line it up at the top, and then line it up at the bottom. And when I'm happy it is, you should also be able to see that it's going to go straight through the V of the stitches. And then I'll cut. Now I'm not going to move it. I'm just going to rotate my mat so I can do it exactly the same on the other side. Making sure it hasn't moved at all. Again, lining up those points and the V's of the stitches. Now we have 4 pieces. Let's press them. So we've already set the stitches, and what I want to do is make sure I'm pressing towards the dark. So I'm just going to flip it over, open it up, and I know that my seams are coming towards the dark fabric. I'm just going to finger press it here. We don't want any creases in here. We want it to sit really nice and flat. And when I'm happy, I'll press. And I'll repeat that for all 4 pieces. Okay, now we need to trim our half square triangles. So now we just need to square off all our half square triangles at 4.5 inches squared, and I do have a 4.5 inch Creative Grids ruler here, which I really like. It's got a line on the ruler which I then line up on my seam, and then I just make sure that the ruler is fitting on top of the fabric and I am getting it at the full 4.5 inches. For example, we wouldn't want it over slightly like this because then we'd be cutting it too small. So I'll just move it back into the center, and then I'm going to cut on all 4 sides. And I'm just going to turn my mat. Okay, so that works really nicely if you've got a Creative Grids ruler. Now if you don't worry, you can just use your regular ruler. So I've taken my next piece and I'm going to find the 45-degree line on my ruler, line that up on my seam, and then we just need to check that we are going to be able to cut it at the 4.5 inches, and that looks good to me. So then I'll rotate that around to do the other side. So I've got the edge that I just cut on the 4.5 inches, and I've got the 45-degree line on my seam, and then I'll trim it. And I'll do the same to the other side. So now I can see before I cut, I've got this edge on 4.5. I've got this edge down here on a straight line, and then this edge up here is also meaning I've got an exactly 4.5 inch square. Oh, that's just a little bit crooked. So just double check before you cut. And now I have another perfect 4.5 inch square. I'll do the same for the other 2 pieces. So now I've got my 2.5 by 18 inch strips. I'm just going to place them right sides together and then line up the side edge, the top edge, and the other side edge and pin it in place. And then I'm just going to sew down one side exactly how I did before, not worrying about a back stitch. So just trimming the thread, and then we'll press. So now I'm just going to set the stitches, which helps them set into the fabric and also helps our block lay flatter. And then what I'm going to do is press the seams towards the dark. So I'll open it up and then give it a finger press. We don't want any creases in here. And then once I'm happy, I'll give it a press. Okay, I'll give the whole piece a once over. And now let's cut it. So now I've got my two 18.5 inch strips sewn together, and if I just bring it down onto my 0 line here, I can measure it, and it's measuring exactly 4.5 inches, so it's perfect. If yours is not measuring 4.5 inches, you might have either cut the fabric slightly wider or slimmer, or your 1/4 inch is a little bit off. So just double check that, because it does need to be accurate. You may need to unpick it and sew it again with the right 1/4 inch seam allowance. If it's wider, then you could just trim it. So all I'm going to do is take my ruler, find 4.5 inches on my ruler, line up the edge of the fabric on a line on my ruler, and then once I'm happy, I'll cut. And we'll repeat that until we've got 4 4.5 inch squared blocks. And we can just quickly check that last one is measuring 4.5 inches, and it is. So now I'm ready to sew them all together. So now we've made all our pieces, we need to lay them out correctly, and I do have my image here to copy. You can find that over on my website. I'll put a link down in the description below. I'm going to start with E fabric, which was my center square. So I'm going to pop that in the center. Then I'm going to take my half square triangles, and the A fabric for me was this green fabric. So I'm going to place that in all the corners so that the green is in the outer corner. So we want the same fabric, whatever you've chosen to use, always in this outer corner here. So just keep an eye on that. And then for the pieces that we just cut, my C fabric is the cream here. So I want that also on the outer edge. So I'm going to place them all in the correct position. And you can just run your eye around and make sure everything is in the right position. So I've got my apricots all pointing in. I've got my lighter apricots all surrounding the purple. Just do a double check to make sure they all are in the right order, because it is super easy to accidentally get it wrong. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly pin them together so I know I'm sewing them in the right order by the row. So I'm just going to take this one, fold it on top with the right sides together, open it up, take this piece, fold it down, pop it on top and place a pin in. So you can see it's still in the right order. And then I'll do the same for the following two rows. I just find this easier than chain piecing. If you find chain piecing easier, then by all means do that. But for me, this is just the best way to make sure I do in fact sew them in the correct order. I'm just doing them roughly because I will fix it up when we come to sew. Okay, let's sew them together. So I'll just take my first row and I'll just find a pin, and I'm just going to take it out, and then I'm just going to check that all the edges are lined up nicely. So on the side, the top and the side. And once I'm happy, I'll pop the pin back in and sew it. Now I can feel that I've got a seam at the back here. And because I'm coming down this way, it is going to sit correctly. So just keep an eye on that. We want all our seams sitting really nicely, so our blocks are going to sit nice and flat. And I'm doing everything the same as before. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on. I'm stitching at stitch length 2, and I'm not worrying about a back stitch. So just coming right off the edge, trimming my thread, finding the next pin and doing exactly the same, just lining up all those edges. Once I'm happy, popping my pin back in and sewing, and I'll continue on until I've done all 3 rows. So now I've sewn all 3 rows together, let's give them a quick press. So now I've just popped them back in the correct order, so just double check that it is looking right. And what we're going to do is we're going to press the top and the bottom seams one way and the middle seam the other way, and that's so we can nest our seams. So I'll press these seams to the right. I'll just set them first. And then I'm just going to make sure they're facing towards the right. Finger press it so we don't have any creases in here. And press. Check these seams are also facing towards the right. Finger press and press. Oh. And then for these seams, I'm going to press them to the left. So I will set the seams. And now I can see that one's facing to the left. I'll just give it a finger press and press. And then the same for this seam. Just giving the whole piece a press while I'm there. And then for the last one, doing exactly the same except pressing them back to the right again. Okay, let's sew our rows together. So making sure the rows are in the correct order, I'm just going to take this top row and fold it down onto the middle row. And then I'm just going to find the first set of seams and nest them. So I've got a video on this, I'll put a link down in the description below, but this fabric's folded over and going this way, this fabric's folded over and going this way, and then we push those two seams up together to nest them, and then we can open it up and just double check we're getting a nice straight line, and once we're happy, pop a pin in. Oh. You might want to pop 2 pins in, one on either side of the seams, or one like this that's going in from this seam and then coming out on the back seam. Then I'll find the next seam and do exactly the same. Pop a pin in. And then I'm just going to pin the edges at the bottom. And again at the top. Okay, so now I'm going to sew along that edge, and then I'll just sew on the bottom row, just as I did these 2 rows. Alright, just trimming the threads, and then let's give that one final press. So now I'm just going to set the stitches again. And then I'm just going to press the seams either way, it doesn't matter at this point. So I'm just making sure they're lying nice and flat, giving it a finger press and pressing. And again on the second seam. Oh, I can feel this one wants to tuck up underneath. This seam's being a bit fiddly. There we go. And then I'll just give the whole block a quick press. Now remember, we're not going to worry about squaring them off just yet. We need to finish all 12 blocks and then work out what our smaller size is, because if for some reason we've got a block that's quite a bit smaller than the rest of them, we'll either have to redo that block or cut all the blocks down to the smaller size. So there we have our Grecian block. Now I think it's a really nice, quick and simple block to make. We're actually scheduled to finish this series of the mystery block of the month at the end of November, but that really is Christmas time. So if you'd like to finish earlier, please let me know by leaving a comment, and we might be doing 2 blocks in July if that's what everyone would like to do. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notifications every time I do a new video. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching my videos. If you're enjoying them, please like, subscribe and leave a comment.